Podcast.
It's Big Podcast Playbook, the marketing podcast for podcasters. My name is David Hooper. If you want to grow your podcast audience, get more people to your show, make people care about your show, make more money with your show, make a podcast that has impact, make a podcast that makes your mother proud, bigpodcast.com is the site. After nearly 700 episodes, I've changed the name of this podcast. Just a few episodes ago, it was called Build a Big Podcast. The old name told you what it was. The new name tells you how we're going to do it. One play at a time. 700 episodes in, you might be thinking, why change it now? And I'm going to talk about that, why I changed it, why now, why not just leave it alone? You may be asking these questions about your podcast. That's why I'm sharing this with you. I want to help you do this because this is something that in years of working with podcasters, I see all the time. People want to change the names of their podcast. It's not uncommon to see a podcaster change the name of a podcast 5 or 6 times, even change the complete direction of a podcast. And a lot of that is, well, they didn't plan it out well enough. They were interested in one thing. Now they're interested in another thing. There's the grass is always greener, shiny object syndrome. There are a lot of good reasons to change your podcast. One of my goals, if you've read my books, if you've heard the podcast, read the blog posts, get it together before you start your podcast. Know what you're getting into, sharpen the axe, if you will. People don't do that. They jump in. They expect instant results. The inside is always different from the outside. They don't get those instant results. They think a name change is going to do it. I don't think that. So why change? Well, I'm going to dive more into that. One of the things you're going to get with this episode, you're going to get a practical framework for timing a rebrand, avoiding pitfalls, some of these things that I'm talking about, having to change your name 5 or 6 times, and also how you can use a rename change to get relaunch momentum. That can be one of the positives. That's one of the reasons that you see people changing their names 5 or 6 times. They need that internal momentum. They've lost the excitement of the podcast that they started, lost that luster, and they need something to motivate them. Here's the thing, though. There are ups and downs in podcasting. If you want to get to the level of this podcast as far as episodes, close to 700 episodes, you got to have an internal motivation, man. Listeners come, listeners go. Sometimes you feel great about a podcast, sometimes not. That's the nature of being in anything for a long time. I've been doing broadcast radio, this run, for 20 years. Before that, 14 years earlier, I just started college, was doing broadcast radio then, do broadcast radio post-college. That is a long time. Every day I wake up and I do radio. Every day I do podcasting. What motivates you? It's not always the external. It's got to be the internal. So that's something we're going to touch on in this episode as well. Let's talk about the context. The old name, Build a Big Podcast. What it did well. Well, it was great because it had a B at the very front of it. And I talked about this in my book. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but alphabetically, names still matter. A lot of people sort podcasts alphabetically. So if you got a name that begins with B, that's going to do better than a name that begins with C or D or Z, because people do sort podcasts alphabetically. And that's one of the things that I thought about when I started Build a Big Podcast. Now, I could have called it Big Podcast, by the way. So let me throw that out there why I did not. There's a podcast with Shaquille O'Neal. It is called The Big Podcast with Shaq. It has nothing to do with my company, which is called Big Podcast. I don't care if he uses that name, but I didn't want to get into any issues. I didn't want people to confuse me with Shaquille O'Neal or find Shaquille if they were searching for me or vice versa. That probably wasn't going to happen, the vice versa. But that's one of the issues that you're going to face if you've got a generic name like Big or a generic name like Podcast or something like Big Podcast. There's a million podcasts that use those 2 words, Big Podcast, in them. So build a big podcast, putting 2 additional words. That was going to help people find me. Did it? Kind of. Unless you've got a super popular podcast, and that would be something like Call Her Daddy, WTF with Mark Maron, something at that level. Search for podcasting, not great. Especially if you've got the word podcast in your title. So there were some things going against me. Regardless of that, though, I was never really fully happy with the name. I thought, well, it tells what it is. It teaches you how to build a big podcast. But it was linear. It seemed linear anyway. People thought that it was. It was an A to Z thing, build a big podcast. Okay, I was getting a certain type of listener. They wanted me to take them through a step-by-step process. It didn't really do that. Now, you could say Big Podcast Playbook. That does the same thing. And this is another thing when you think about the title for your podcast. Are people expecting a linear thing or something they can jump in on at any time? Big Podcast Playbook, word is still out about that. My intention is that we can take a page from the playbook. You can input that into what you're doing with your podcast, and you're going to get something out of it. That was my intention with Build a Big Podcast. I don't know yet, but what I do know, I mentioned the inside is always different from the outside, is when I released Build a Big Podcast almost 700 episodes ago, that's what people thought. It was an A to Z thing. And I think that's because there are a lot of the how-to podcasting podcasts. They do that. They're going for the beginners. They're going for the launch a podcast. It's a great opportunity. All you got to do is release an episode and you're going to be famous just like Joe Rogan. That's not what I do because that's not the reality. This is not an opportunity seekers podcast. This is a podcast for independent podcasters or otherwise people with a message. Maybe you're a speaker. You're somebody who's written books. You've got a message that you want to get out via audio. This is a podcast for you. It is not a podcast for be famous, be just like Call Her Daddy. No. Like I said, I'm in the trenches, man. I know how this works. We'll get into that a little bit later in this episode. Because this is not the kind of thing that you can release an episode or two, even 100 episodes, and immediately have success. You've got to do these little things. And that's the playbook. We're going to take a page from the playbook on each episode of this new podcast. And you're going to make your podcast better one play at a time. But to wrap this up, the old name compared to the new name, Build, I think it centers around startup mode. You're probably beyond that. You're somebody with a message to spread. You've already got a podcast. You're looking to tweak it, not necessarily build it from the ground up. Well, this is going to be better for you. We're going to take a page from the playbook, plug that into your podcast. It's going to make your podcast better. Another reason the old name was limiting, I think people were looking for tips and tricks, and this may happen with the current name as well, Big Podcast Playbook. A lot of people looking for tips and tricks. It goes back to doing that one thing. If I just do this one thing, then everything will be okay. And we do that throughout life. That's not just podcasting. It's going to be for your podcast. It's going to be for weight loss. If I only lost 15 pounds, my life would be perfect. If I only had hair, my life would be perfect. If I only had more money, my life would be perfect. We think like that as humans. But people are coming to me. They were looking for these easy answers. No, that's not what I do. Go to another podcast for that. They'll give you easy answers. Will it work as well as what I've got? No. I'm in the trenches, man. I can tell you it's not going to work like that. It's not sexy. That's not necessarily easy to swallow. It doesn't feel good. It's like somebody lying to you. Oh, yeah, baby, I love you. I'll never cheat on you again. But you know they're going to go do it again. It feels good in the moment, but is it reality? I'm about reality. I wanted a title and I want a format that reflects that. Is that for everybody? No. Some people aren't going to get that. They want something easy. They want something instant. And I get it. We make it look easy as podcasters. The example I give is when you hear a podcaster speak. You hear me? I'm pretty smooth on the mic. Am I smooth on the mic completely live? Yeah, I am. Am I even smoother, though, when things have been edited? Yes, I am. And your listeners have that same thing, too. They think, oh, man, that guy, that lady, so smooth. But you know, the reality is not like that. At least if you're doing this right, you're editing your episodes, you're making things look right. The reason I bring that up is because we buy into our own hype. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but this absolutely happens, that people are so used to seeing themselves with makeup or so used to seeing themselves with Instagram filters. Things are the equivalent of airbrushing or hearing your voice with compression and editing that you don't realize what you really look like or what you really sound like. It happens. And we buy into what other people are doing with those things. Oh, that person's flawless. No. We make it look easy, though. That's cool. Just don't buy into your own hype. Why change to Big Podcast Playbook now? Why, after almost 700 episodes, am I doing this moment? Well, the best time to change anything is now. You've heard the saying, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time, today. There's sunk cost bias. There's sunk cost perfectionism. You go into relationships, well, I can't leave now. I'm 30 years old. I'm 40 years old. We've been married 10, 20 years. We built so much together. No, don't stay in a bad relationship with a person or your podcast. The best time to do it is now. And the reason that I did it is I'm working on this new book. It's a podcast launch plan. Ironically, A to Z, thing that I was trying to get away from on the Build a Big Podcast name. And I'm writing the name of my podcast, Build a Big Podcast. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm going to be reaching a lot of new people from this book, people who don't know me. They'll be coming over to the podcast. And do I want them to come to build a big podcast, or do I want them to come to something that I really love? It's timing. Let me give you a famous example of this. WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. It was not always known as World Wrestling Entertainment. For years and years and years, WWF, World Wrestling Federation. But that's a problem because WWF is the World Wildlife Foundation. Everywhere outside of the United States, WWF meant something. If these guys wanted to go worldwide with their wrestling, they were going to run into trouble. They changed the name to WWE because there was an MTV show that was very popular at the time. I think this is 20 years ago now. Nobody even thinks about it now. And that goes back to the point. The time to do is now. And before you know it, they're not going to call it WWF anymore. They're going to call it WWE. Anyway, they had this MTV show called Tough Enough or Get in the Ring or something like that. They were trying out new wrestlers, kind of a reality competition show. They're trying them out on the show, and they thought this is the perfect time with all these people watching to switch over to WWE. So they did. Was it weird at first? Yeah. WWF, WWE. I mean, logo is a pretty easy change, right? Add another horizontal line at the end of that F, make it an E. But it's still weird. Within a couple weeks, though, everybody's into it. And now, 20 years later, nobody thinks about WWF anymore. If you've got an opportunity like that, absolutely look at your name change. What about format changes? The new format to me, and this is another discussion to have, it's not completely new, but I found myself for a few years doing the Big Podcast Insider episodes, the newsletter. I've got a weekly newsletter. It's called Big Podcast Insider, and I was doing an audio edition of that. Part of the audio edition was because there was a sponsorship for that newsletter. It was also a sponsorship for the podcast, and you would hear me promote a certain company. There's a story behind why I'm not promoting that company anymore. That's something I'm going to cover on a future episode. If you're interested in making sure you hear it, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast. You'll be updated as soon as that episode is out. The bottom line, though, is because of that sponsorship, I was contractually obligated to deliver a certain type of episode. Did it work for me? Yes, it did work for me until the amount of work that I started picking up got to be too much. And to put those insider episodes together, that was a lot of work. That's a lot more work than a shorter, tighter, focused episode. A lot more sound effects, an ad read, music behind the ads. It had to be released every week. I mean, it's contractually done. So I didn't have the flexibility. That's another reason. I decided to take a break from that as well as a newsletter so I can finish out this book. Because I'm changing to a format that supports my schedule, my creative energy, it's also a great time to change the name. Your sustainability, you want to think about that. Does your name and format support consistency? I think it's fine to skip a couple weeks. I don't think you have to be weekly. I don't think you have to be daily. Strangely enough, the very first name of this podcast was Big Podcast Daily. I did it as a 30-day challenge. I said, I'm going to do an episode every day for 30 days. I kept that up for, I think it was 174 days. Kept going and going and going and going until I didn't want to anymore. Again, sustainability, that's important. You don't want to burn yourself out on this and not do it. And that's why you want to think about that with your name. Something like daily, weekly. My suggestion when it comes to names, don't do something timely with your name. One of the issues with Big Podcast Daily, by the way, because I mentioned that Big Podcast is kind of general. People thought I was a news show, maybe, celebrity gossip or something. I was getting a lot of listens, a lot of downloads, but they weren't my audience because Big Podcast Daily, that didn't really tell people what the podcast was about. The pendulum swung the other way. Build a big podcast, pretty obvious, right? That didn't work either. I mean, it worked, but there's something better for where I am now. And you could argue that's another lesson. What works for you now might not work for you in the future. What worked for you then isn't working for you now. It's okay to change. There's some things you can do to think about sustainability. One of them, don't call your podcast daily, weekly, monthly. Consider that something like your feed. Maybe you have a general feed. For example, the feed for this podcast, feed.bigpodcast.com/bigpodcast. I don't have to worry about changing the feed ever again. The feed for Build a Big Podcast, feed.bigpodcast.com/BBP. The feed for Big Podcast Daily, not BBP, but BPD. Would it have mattered if I didn't change the name of the feed? No, it wouldn't. Did I lose some people when I changed the name of the feed? Yes, and that's the issue. You don't want to change your feed if you don't have to. Think about sustainability with your title, your feed, your domain name, your company name, really everything. A quick side note, this is an example that comes from the book. I'm vegetarian now. I didn't used to be vegetarian. If McDonald's came to me and asked me for a jingle or voiceover, not really a match for me now. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it. Maybe I would. But it's not really a match for you. Again, people change, plans change. Your podcast is going to change. What worked for you then may not work for you now. What works for you now may not work for you in the future. But think about these things. I wanted something open with the new name, Playbook. It's modular, repeatable plays, something you can jump in on at any time. Maybe. We'll see what people think. Maybe it's like Build a Big Podcast. I kind of thought that was sort of like that, but listeners didn't so much. Ironically, by the way, the upcoming book, that is an A to Z plan. So if you're looking for an A to Z plan, this is a launch and relaunch guide. It takes you through the process, A to Z. That is coming soon. How soon? I don't know. I thought it was going to be out 3 years ago. Let's talk about what's changing. Episode packaging, cleaner, clearer episodes, more focused episodes. When I was doing the newsletter editions, I would cover, 6 or 7 topics. This podcast, these episodes, they cover one topic. They're quicker. They're to the point. Packaging pretty much looks the same. Artwork is more or less the same. I just changed the name. You can see that. Bigpodcast.com if you want to look at it. I've got the opportunity to do mini courses. I just did one about finding your voice, maybe a 5-episode course. The last one, 8 episodes. Very specific. So if you're looking for something like that, that's what you're going to get with this podcast. What's staying? The same mission. I want to help you grow your podcast, keep listeners who matter, and also attract listeners who matter. Same voice, direct and practical. There's no fluff. If you're subscribed to Build a Big Podcast, you're already subscribed to Big Podcast Playbook. If you want to subscribe, the subscription is the same, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. You know this. One click is all you need. One click for RSS, one click for iPhone, one click for Android. By the way, that's a great way to do it. Make it easy for people to subscribe. And if you want to steal that page, feel free. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Steal the copy, steal the graphics. I don't care. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Obviously, you want to put your links in, not mine. Don't steal the links. Don't even borrow them. Put your links in there so people subscribe to your podcast, not mine. I want to finish up talking about a rebrand readiness checklist. It's okay for you to relaunch. If you are launching a podcast, maybe you're a first-time podcaster when you did that. You don't know as much as you know now that you've got your podcast going. And even if you're an established podcaster, you don't know as much as you will after having launched your podcast. Now you know more, so you can do more. Think about consistency. Think about what it's going to take for you to maintain and improve your release schedule. Maybe you don't feel that daily is good for you or good for your audience. It's easy to burn an audience out on a daily podcast. So maybe weekly is going to be better for you. It's more sustainable. It's better for your audience. So figure out your consistency. You might want to figure out your audience clarity. Maybe you've attracted people that you're not interested in speaking to. And I'll give you an example of that. I had a podcast before this podcast called Red, R-E-D, Reach, Engage, and Develop Your Audience. It was originally, this is the subtitle, the podcast for influencers. That was before the name influencers became what it is now. Social media people that, sell stuff, influence buying, whatever they do. Before that, influence meant actually making change in the world. A lot of entrepreneurs, they consider themselves influencers. And I'll give you an example of that. A good one is an entrepreneur who put up a series of restaurants where he would get unhoused people, formerly we would call them homeless. Again, words are changing all the time. Unhoused people to work that restaurant, develop the skills that it takes to build, maintain, operate a restaurant, get them off the street, and get them employed in the restaurant business. That's influence and that's impact. That's what I focus on with the podcasters that I work with. It's not just about building an audience. It's not just about making money. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's having impact. And that's why you hear me say that. So audience clarity, who is this for now? Who is it not for? Think about that with your podcast. You might want to do a catalog audit, looking at legacy episodes that still fit the new promise. Maybe you want to repackage those, update titles, maybe sweeten the pot a little bit so you're not starting from scratch. Or what I did, flip the switch, operate under the new title, done. If you're going to do a name change, you want to do an asset audit. Look at your cover art. For me, it was very easy. I talked about this a minute ago when I talked about a feed, doing something that you can change up if you need to without a whole lot of mess. My episode art was definitely that way. It said, build a big podcast in text. Change it to Big Podcast Playbook, done. If you got a logo, a little more complicated. So think about that with your rebrand. Regardless, you're going to look at your cover art, your website, social handle, podcast directories, email footers, any kind of AI tools that you're doing your episode notes maybe. The name of your current podcast is probably in there. Change that to the new name you're going to use. You're going to find a lot of these things that kind of linger a little bit. Maybe you don't get to them because there's a lot of things that you're going to need to change, but those are going to be the big ones. The cover art, website, social handles, podcast directories, email footers, intro and outro scripts, where you have those written down. Your media kit, metadata, you want to look at that. Episode descriptions, your keywords, look at those things. Maybe what you want to do, speaking of the book, the first book that I put out called Big Podcast, this is controversial. I told people to launch with 25 episodes, and there's a lot of reasons for that. You can read the book if you really want to go deep into it. One of the reasons is for you to get clear on your podcast. You already relaunched. You know more now than you did, what I said a minute ago. But if you want to nudge the path a little bit, maybe the first 3 episodes of your new podcast, the new name, just to get people engaged in the new format, maybe you want to do that. This is kind of that right here. Because I talk to podcasters, you might be thinking about a name change. A lot of podcasters are. This is me guiding you through the process that I've just done, but it's also hyping up, explaining where this podcast is going. So you might want to do something similar to that with your podcast. You're going to want to have a migration plan. Any kind of channel that you're reaching people on, whether it's Blue Sky, Mastodon, email, within your podcast, give people a month, maybe a couple of months. Hey, we have changed the name of this podcast. You'll say, this podcast formerly known as, then give them the name of the new podcast. Let me give you an example of how this works. I'm working on a show for SiriusXM. They brought me in because there was a host that had a show on one network. Sirius wanted to produce it themselves. They brought me in to do that. This is a guy who's been in the radio business for 20-something years. We're 5 months into the new show. People are still finding out, oh man, you changed? I was calling the old number. Oh, I was trying to find you on the old hours. I was wondering where you went. They have no idea what happened. And this is a big company that's explaining what is happening, and they're doing a very good job of it. Regardless, you have those people, they're not listening as much as you think. They tune in every once in a while with something like Sirius. Maybe they're in a car that doesn't have Sirius. They go back to a car that does. It happens. A lot of your listeners not as engaged as you think. This is why if you're ever doing a product launch, you're going to talk about that morning, noon, and night all the time. It's going to make you feel like, man, I'm wearing these guys out. No, you're not wearing people out. It's that people come and people go. Now, are you wearing some people out? Yeah. Your super fans, maybe. But they're going to get it. Don't let that stop you from getting out there and promoting your stuff, letting people know what's going on. You've got to overcompensate for that. And even if you do, some people still won't know. 5 months in on a national network and people still don't know. It's kind of funny at this point. That's just the way it is. Like, where have you been, man? It's been 5 months. There's a possibility that when you started this episode, you had no thought about changing your name, but now you're thinking, maybe I should change my name. Let me give you a naming test. We're going to give you 5 filters, 5 things to think about when looking at your new name. You don't want to be in the same situation that you're in now and having to be one of those guys that changed your name 5 or 6 times. So let's look at 5 filters. First of all, the promise. What does a new listener instantly expect from you? Is there a promise in your name or in your subtitle? Also, portability. Does it work for future episodes? Something like a book, any kind of course you're doing, training, live events. I remember a morning show. This is in the 80s, and we were going to war. There were missiles known as Scuds. Everybody at the time knew about them. And there happened to be a morning show on FM radio. They were looking for a brand new name. They used to be called something like the Zoo Crew or the Morning Zoo. And they wanted a new name because there was a new host. I remember somebody called in, wanted to call him like John and the Scud Busters. And the host, he was smart enough to pick up on this. He said, man, about a month from now, nobody's going to know what a Scud is. Scud Busters, what? Think about that. Is it going to work for future products? Are people going to know what it is in the future? If not, don't use it. Third thing, searchability, conflicts and uniqueness. I'm not changing the name of the company. The name of the company works. And I don't have the company name for search. I sat down with an attorney at a podcasting conference. This is so crazy. He said, you might want to add an extra G to your name. I said, what, big, like B-I-G-G podcast, big podcast? He said, yeah. He goes, that way you can trademark it. No, I'll trademark B-I-G podcast. I mean, maybe that would have worked in search as well. That's assuming people would spell it B-I-G-G. Then you got to brand a name. You don't want to do that. People make the name, well, Google did it. Yeah, they did, but how many billions of dollars have they done to do that? Fourth thing, elasticity. Does the name stretch to advanced topics? Big Podcast Playbook? Yeah. Big Podcast Beginners? No. And that's why I don't call it Big Podcast Beginners. Think about that with your podcast name. Does it stretch to what you want to cover beyond the very specific thing that you're covering now? Now, if it's a limited edition, limited run thing, where you've got 6 episodes and all you're going to do is talk about this one thing, be specific by all means. But for an ongoing podcast, you get into hundreds and hundreds of episodes, make sure you've got a name that's going to work with you. Can you change it? Yeah, obviously. I'm doing that with this podcast now. Do you want to? No, you don't. And that's the fifth thing, longevity. Is the name going to fit in 3 to 5 years? Johnny and the Scud Busters? No. Stick with Johnny and the Zoo Crew. But even that, trends change. You don't have morning zoo shows now. Radio has changed, and your podcast is going to change. Are you going to change with it? Yeah, hopefully. You want to give yourself a name with a little slack. It's going to allow you to grow. And I'd say 3 to 5 years is good, maybe 2 to 3 years if you want to be a little shy of that. Definitely not something that's trending right now. That's the downside, I think, of a lot of social media. That's one of the things that we as podcasters have the opportunity to not do. I see a lot of podcasters do this. Man, you got to go with what's trending. This is what's happening right now, this very hour. That's exhausting, man. You don't want to do that every day. Wake up every hour. Something different's trending. You're trying to jump onto that. Think about the audience these guys are getting. And this is why people are exhausting themselves trying to chase that audience. No. With podcasting, we've got the opportunity to plant that flag and let people come to us. So think about that with your name. Let's look at those 5 filters again. The promise. What does a new listener instantly expect? That you flying your flag. Portability. Is it going to work for future products, courses, live events that you do? Whatever you want to do. Television, live theater, I don't know. Is it going to work for that? Searchability. Conflicts, uniqueness. Avoid generic terms only. With that said, something like Big Podcast, I can throw Playbook in there. It works. I don't have to change my name to BIGG. Elasticity, is it going to stretch to advanced topics? And also longevity. Are you going to be able to do it for 2 to 3 years? That's what I say is minimum. Ideally, 3 to 5 years. I'm going to give you a rollout. Here's how to do it. Update your artwork, your description, your website header. Get familiar with a new intro or outro if you're going to introduce yourself that way. That's the first couple of weeks before you flip the switch on this. Second week, that's 2 weeks out. 1 week out, maybe a teaser trailer. Let people know what's coming. Have that teaser ready to flip the switch on when you go live. An email list announcement. Hey, we're changing a week out. A social pin. We're changing a week out. Week 0, rebrand. Clear title, strong CTA. Maybe you want to do an episode like this. Here's why we are changing. Let people in on it. Let them feel like they're part of things. Afterwards, immediately the next week, the next month, you're going to remind listeners in every episode. You're going to share listener questions. you're going to let them see the new format in action. It's a 6-week process, 2 weeks beforehand, 4 weeks afterwards. Are you going to feel exhausted doing it? Yeah, but overcompensate. Remember what I said about the SiriusXM show. 5 months in, and listeners still don't know. Here's some mistakes to avoid. You don't want to change the name without changing something about the promise or the format. Listeners want a tangible shift, and that could just be your imaging. Don't just change the name. Give them a tangible shift. Let them know they're getting something different. That way they're more engaged with you. Like I said, there's an opportunity for you to get engaged. There's an opportunity for listeners to get engaged. But you got to change something. They need more than just the name. Otherwise, they're going to ignore the name. They won't know that it's changed. And then 5 months later, what? It's changed? So update your intros, your outros, maybe update some episode titles. Don't ignore things like podcast slugs, metadata, plan for propagation. That's going to take a minute to go through all the networks that your podcast is synced with. It's not instant. You may want to give your listeners an FAQ, frequently asked questions, because again, they may not be with you as often as you think. So will my subscription still work? Yes. Same feed, but new name and art. Are old episodes staying? You're going to want to let them know? Yes. If you want to go back in the archives, those episodes are still there. Maybe do a best of guide. Is it still for old listeners? Let them know. For this podcast, by the way, yes, still for independent podcasters. Even more so in that it's for intermediate and advanced level independent podcasters. Somebody asked me, and this is something to add to your FAQ, am I going to be doing interviews? You know, I want to do more interviews. In fact, somebody asked me this the other day. They said, if you had to start a brand new podcast from scratch, what would that podcast be about? I said, I would do a podcast about interviewing, how to get a good interview, talk to great interviewers, talk about how they're getting great interviews. How does this guy do it compared to the next guy? How does that guy do it compared to this lady? There is a real art to connecting with other people in audio. And I would love to do that podcast. I'm limited on time. Maybe someday. It's definitely coming in the form of a book. Watch for that. So that's it. That's why this podcast is changing. If you're thinking about changing your podcast, how to do that. If you want help making these things happen, I can help you. I work with independent podcasters every day of the week. I've got something called Big Podcast AMP. It stands for Audio Monetization Program. You can find it at bigpodcast.com/amp. If you want more information from me, you want to subscribe to the podcast, everything is at bigpodcast.com. As I mentioned, I've got a subscription page there. That is the best way to subscribe to this podcast. 1 click is all it takes. 1 click for iPhone, 1 click for Android, 1 click for the all-new Big Podcast Playbook RSS feed. You will find that at bigpodcast.com. And while you were there, if you need a subscription page, steal mine, man. Take the copy, take the graphics. It works. Bigpodcast.com, that's where to find it. Go there now before you forget. Subscribe, and I will see you on the next episode of Big Podcast Playbook.